that centrally plans interest
Yeah,
rates.
but they're not giving money. They're lending money, and the Federal Reserve is not giving General Motors money, or the U.S. government is not just giving them money or giving AIG money and say, take this, you don't have to pay it back, or whatever the bank is. They're lending the money. And there are some banks that are paying back because they don't want the American government to be in their business.
Yeah.
They don't want to get directions from the president or the government of the United States. And so capitalism is indeed working. And the U.S. government is ensuring that it does work by propping them up and making them more efficient and making them more accountable.
Well, perhaps we're just quibbling over the terminology, but for me, capitalism is not. I mean, right now, the Federal Reserve holds hundreds of billions of dollars of assets that they've bought from these banks, like mortgage-backed securities, what's been called toxic assets. So they're on the Fed's books, and that's the only thing keeping these banks afloat. So for me, in my definition, if it takes massive government bailouts to prop companies up, that's not capitalism. I don't know what you want to call it, but that's not free market capitalism.
You don't think it is free market capitalism for a bank to borrow from the government?
No, I don't think.
What is that?
Well, if you had to label, I guess it's some form of socialism or fascism, depending on how you want to label it. It's not pure. It's a mixed economy, obviously. But I'm saying capitalism, banks borrow money from the private sector. The government's there just to ensure that the rules are enforced, and the government didn't do a good job, I grant you. But the point is, the government's not supposed to be owning shares in banks or owning car companies. That's not capitalism. Whereas right now, the U.S. government literally owns the majority shares in some of these big companies.
But Dr. Murphy, don't you think Americans have a rather naive view of this situation? That you can't have a situation of pure capitalism.
This is probably improved capitalism.
That's certainly what the rationale has been, but again, we're just begging the question that if I'm right, and maybe I'm not, but if I am right, that all of these things to so-called improved capitalism have been sowing the seeds for all these problems, and then the government comes in and distorts capitalism again to try to fix things, and I think it's just going to make the problems worse.
But the government did what it did because it felt like there was no other entity which could do it in terms of providing the kind of funding which was needed. And I don't believe the philosophy of the U.S. government is really to control the private sector. I don't think that. I think they were just being responsible. But obviously you don't.
Right. I mean, I disagree, and
Yeah, but what is the philosophy of the U.S. government then? What is the philosophy of not only your president but the Congress? Isn't the philosophy remains to have a strong system of capitalism in America?
I think their actual philosophy is, what do they do to get reelected? And then in the current situation, what they do is, yeah, they have to provide relief measures because the public agrees with the prevailing wisdom that you can't sit back and do nothing. So you're right. If President Obama, when he was campaigning, said, I think I'll get in office and do nothing and sit back and let the market fix itself, he wouldn't have won the election. I agree with that it's not politically saleable to do what I'm talking about.
So you're suggesting that the U.S. is moving to more of a European style of governance?
Certainly that's the trend right now. I don't know if it's going to stay in that realm. I mean, it's sort of ironic that many of the former communist countries are moving towards more of a capitalist system, and the U.S. is moving the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm. I have one or two friends who say to me that, the money didn't disappear off the face of the earth. That the money is still here. And while banks have been failing and automobile companies have been failing, the money is still here. Now, you are an economist, and you might be able to better explain the situation to them. Where did the money go?
Well, yeah, I think that's partially correct. So, if you have housing prices that collapse, if your house drops 20%, on paper you're that much poorer, and there isn't necessarily someone else in the world that has that money now in their bank account, right? That just that the asset value drops. That doesn't mean that someone else has to have that money. But I think it is true right now. There are plenty of venture capitalists, so-called private capital, that they have plenty of money. There's lots of money that's being held in very liquid forms right now because no one knows where to invest. They're so uncertain, and I think that's partly fueled by all these radical government measures. I mean, whether or not you think they're a good idea, what the government's been doing is unusual for U.S. standards, and so people who normally invest in the U.S. are sitting on the sidelines. They're waiting for things to calm down.
Yeah, but where is the money? You say people are holding on to liquid cash, but where is the money? Is it in the United States economy?
I'm not sure exactly geographically where it is, but just to give you an example, the money supply, like the amount of actual U.S. dollars in checking account balances, that went up 17% during the year 2008, and yet prices were fairly flat. So you see people were accumulating actual cash holdings, and they weren't spending it. And I think part of it was just because of the uncertainty. They didn't know what was happening. So there's one example, and I'm not sure exactly where it is. Some people think that it was partly going into certain commodities that you saw. Oil has come up a lot this year. I don't know exactly quantitatively where it is, but I think certainly people have money to invest, but they're just uncertain.
When we return on the program, we want to talk about the price of oil and what it would do to the economy of the world at this time if it increases far beyond what it is today. We take this break on the program and we'll come right back.